Since 1945, Weatherby's been building the finest firearms and ammunition in the world. And today, we're proud to continue that legacy from our facility in Sheridan, Wyoming. This is On Our Mark, the Weatherby Podcast.
Welcome back to On Our Mark, the Weatherby Podcast, where passion meets precision and values meets velocity. I'm your host, Luke Torkeldsen, along with Tyler Grayton and Weatherby's PD manager, JD Ponciano. And today we're diving deep into a topic that can make or break your next hunt, ballistics for hunters. Whether you're hunting pronghorn in the open prairie, elk in the high plains, the high country, or whitetails across the bean field, understanding your rifle's ballistics is what transforms a hopeful shot into a confident one. We'll break down how to build and use your dope chart. That's your data on previous engagements, in case you didn't know. So you'll know exactly how your bullet performs at every yard line. We'll cover modern ballistic calculators that crunch the math for you and why pairing them with a reliable rangefinder can mean the difference between a clean harvest and a missed opportunity. We'll also get into proper rifle setup, choosing the right zero distance, dialing your turrets, practicing with your hunting ammo, not just the cheapest box you can find. Knowing your setup inside and out is what separates the guesswork from precision shooting. So if you want to push your effective range, make ethical shots, and step into the field with confidence this season, stick around. This is On Our Mark, the Weatherby Podcast. Let's get dialed in.
Like the last one. Yeah, that's a good mic drop right there. Dialing it in.
Okay, guys. This is a big deal. We talked to a lot of people at shows. A lot of people just want to shoot their rifle one or two times and go out into the field. And I think that works some places, but it definitely doesn't work everywhere. It definitely, I don't think, works out in the West where you could have a 50-yard shot, you could have a 500-yard shot. There's a lot to this. There's a lot to unpack. Let's just jump in at zero distance. We'll just start at the beginning. Basically, you need to set up a zero. What is that, Tyler?
Setting your zero is essentially like where your scope's on. That's your impact, right, JD? Yep. So like wherever your reticle is, when you're not messing with your scope, that's where it's going to hit. A lot of people use 100-yard zero or 200 yards or 300. So it's a kind of a preference thing. But I'll let JD kind of get into.
We have differing opinions on this, but I think that's okay.
And that's why we're talking about it.
I really like that we do.
Yeah. So 100-yard zero, super common, especially for me out like coming from Missouri. We always shot our guns at 100 yards, and it's like if that's good, then it's the 2 inches high at 100 yards, and you should be set. But since I moved out west, a lot of that has changed. So I still like to use 100-yard zero, but I'll let JD maybe take it away of why he likes 100-yard zero.
I'm a fan, for several reasons. One, for simplicity. Most people are going to have access if their range, regardless of where you live, it's easier to find a 100-yard range. Two, I think you're able to be more precise. So because one MOA, whether you use MOA or mil, but for this example, one MOA is an inch at 100 yards. One MOA at 200 yards would be 2 inches. One MOA at 300 yards is 3 inches. So if you're trying to do a 2 or 300 yard zero, to me, you leave margin for error where you're adjusting your scope, but you're chasing it. So to me, the 100-yard zero makes it easier to make actual click adjustments to where you're going to stay more precise. And then obviously that continues to extrapolate as you go further out. So if you made a half-minute mistake in your initial zero, that's going to, compound itself as we get further out in distance. So I think that's a mistake people make. What you mentioned about, sighting in high at 100, growing up, that's all I ever did. You had like a 3-9 scope that did not have a turret. It was a simple duplex reticle. Yeah. And you zeroed it, but then you were like, okay, it's hitting where I want it to. Now I'm going to put it up a couple inches to account for that holdover so that now, out to 300 yards, you should be pretty good or whatever, depending on caliber, obviously. But it just simplicity-wise now, because scopes have changed so much in the last 10, 20 years, most hunting setups are going to have a turret, meaning you can dial for your reticle for the elevation to account for that bullet drop. But I think there's pros and cons for the 100, 200, and 300. One of the other reasons I went back to a 100-yard zero after switching to a 200, some ballistic solvers, as soon as you put a number in there besides 100, they don't like it. And so I had more than once where you'd set one up and everything was great, and then you put a 200-yard zero in there, and all your numbers were wrong. So I've experienced that firsthand, where in past life doing mainly optics, where you're setting up 20 guns on a line. You dial everything in, and then when the wheels come off and it's a bunch of guns, you're like, I'm not making that mistake again. The other one is guiding, seeing clients that show up in town and you go zero rifles and they're like, man, when I left California or wherever I came from, it was shooting great.
Picking on California?
I'm not. Say Texas for this example, but anywhere that they're, they traveled for the hunt and they paid a lot of money for it. And, you as the guide, you hope that they shoot and it's on, and, you can move on and get ready to go hunting. But as soon as, you start chasing paper and guys only brought 2 boxes of ammo and they go through one pretty quick at the range, to me, just as simple as you can make it, the better. So 100-yard zero if you can, and for those other reasons, for,
Yeah, if you have a
preciseness.
300-yard, in that scenario where maybe you have a less experienced shooter, your zero's at 300 yards, well, they're off, a little bit high and right, and then their gun's also a minute or a minute and a half gun because they don't know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's 7 inches high, and you're like, this gun's not even zeroed in it. It's just because they flinched or made an error. Now you're doing the chasing your tail side. It's like the gun's really not off. It's just that at 300 yards they were not
being
confident.
familiar with
your
your setup too. So many people are not confident in mounting a scope, zeroing it. They don't know how their ballistic stop works, or if they even have a ballistic stop. So when things like that start to go wrong, and
Zero stop,
ballistic stop, when things start going wrong and you're not familiar with your setup, we witnessed this on a hunt a few years ago. One of the guys had a scope that did not have a zero stop. We were chasing antelope. Guy reached over, grabbed his turret, spun it, thinking he was helping, like going to get his elevation right for how far this shot should be. And then without realizing he didn't have a zero stop, just started spinning it back the other way, and now just went,
And then you're like,
2 full
how,
revs
how
too
far
far.
did I go?
Yeah.
So now you're 20 MOA,
Yep.
one way or the other.
The other
Hopefully.
day, we were shooting out at the ranch, and this example came up where we shot out to 1,000, and then everybody's kind of talking afterwards, and it was like time to put guns away. And it's a really common thing. Guys go shoot out to whatever distance, and they're like, I killed it. I hit that steel right in the middle. And they forget to turn back down, and then they get that chance at a buck at 80 yards, and they whiff, and they're like, I don't understand. Well, you were dialed for 22 MOA or whatever the case was.
Yeah.
I want to hear, Luke's good at explaining the 200 or 300-yard zero.
Well, I'm a fan of the 300-yard zero, but I also 100% agree with everything that you said. But I think a lot of what you said was factoring in maybe other people using your gun. So for me, when I hit the field, I do like a 300-yard zero, especially because I primarily hunt with Weatherby cartridges that are typically the fastest for caliber. So 6.5 300, for example, if you have a 300-yard zero, you're going to be roughly 3 inches high at 100. It's like just around 3 inches high at 200 as well, and you're going to be about 3 inches low at 400. And I just know that in my head. It's pretty easy to compensate when you're holding on an animal for about what 3 inches is. So I don't have to do any math out to 400 yards.
You just point and shoot, yeah.
And to me, I like that because that's generally the line. Like probably it's 300 yards, but if you have 300 yards of space between you and whatever you're hunting, you can probably move around a little bit. It's not like you're in an archery situation where something's 20 yards away and it's going to notice you right away. But inside of 300, I feel like you probably need to be pretty still, pretty calm, and I don't want to do a lot of movements. I don't want to have to check stuff. I just want to get on my gun and be able to pull the trigger, probably range it, and that's it. That's just a personal preference thing.
So I'll ask you this question. So when you're zeroing at 300,
Mm-hmm.
do you shoot it at 100 and then put all your data into your calculator and be like, oh, this should, at 300, my zero would be 2.4 or whatever it is, right? Then you dial it and confirm and then reset your zero? Or how would you set it in?
I basically do establish what I would kind of to say, reinforce what JD said. It is harder. There's more factors at 300. It could be environmental factors. I feel like you can be more precise at 100. So I effectively set it at 100 and then I compensate with the math and then adjust my zero accordingly after I'm confident at 100 yards during my setup.
The other one people try to do is if they're making up for limitations on a scope. So many scopes now are 30 millimeter main tube or bigger, 34 and 35. But if it was a 1-inch tube and you were limited to say like 48 minutes of total elevation in that scope, people will try to do
a longer
zero to account for that. But the scope is still limited by the total amount of elevation travel. So you might be able to start and have fewer initial adjustments, but you're still not going to make that scope have more travel. So it doesn't matter how fast your cartridge is. If it's a 1-inch tube with limited elevation, you're going to still run out. And so I used to deal with that a lot.
It makes sense, but it's something that people fail to think about. If you have a 20 MOA total adjustment, but you use 5 MOA just to get to 0, you don't have 25
more
total MOA. You've got 15 left.
Yeah. And inside in, people forget that you're likely to use up, half of what that total travel is. So if you have a scope that's limited already, you eat up a bunch inside in. It's not like you said, you don't get to add more. It's only got so much.
Yeah. There's a lot to it, and I think it needs to be a personal preference thing. And you are only going to get there with some experience and getting out there and trying it. But it depends on your cartridge at the end of the day. For me, if I was shooting a 6.5 Creedmoor, I'm probably going to do 100 yard zero, just because the difference at 100 and 200, if I have a 300 yard zero, it's going to be significant. Like I'll have to probably be 5.5 inches high or something at 100 to get to be. You got it on
There's
the box?
There's a Creedmoor right here. Well, this lists muzzle velocity at 2,700. And so it says 8 inches of drop from, this is a 200 yard zero, so 8 inches of drop to 300 yards.
Yeah, so you're going to be, you might need to be 8 inches high at 100 to be dead on.
My example there, I would be way more bummed if I missed something at 100 yards because I forgot to aim low than I am going to be if something's further and I missed because I was calculating for trajectory.
I think that, like I said, it's personal preference. I think you have to know yourself too. If you're the type of person that gets some significant level of target panic, the more variables you can erase that you have to think about in the moment of the final moments of that hunt, I think the better off you'll be. If you stay a little more calm and collected and can be like, okay, I need to factor wind, I need to factor drop, I got to do all this stuff, then maybe a longer zero would be a good solution for you. But practice both.
Or if your limit, like if you live somewhere like very dense where it's like it's not possible for me to shoot more than 300 yards. That's another scenario where it might be helpful to have a further zero where it's like anything that I see I can point and shoot pretty quickly.
We hunt a lot of antelope. My family does. It's where we live and where we hunt antelope, it's not that easy to get inside of 300 yards. It's pretty flat, and you can use a little bit of the contour of the ground, but you're kind of just like poking up on a small rise and trying to send it, and it's usually like 300 to 500 yards.
JD, would you say if you're using a 100 yard zero, it's important that you do have good scope because like then tracking comes into a lot of play if you're dialing a lot? And
for sure. I guess it would be the same in any, regardless of which one you zero at. But the mistake I would see a lot and still do, people go and shoot and they zero. And this is from a lot of shooting schools where the first thing you do, you're going to confirm that all the rifles are on. Everybody lays down to shoot, shoots at 100, and everybody feels pretty good. Well, then you start dialing and going to 200, 300, 400 and on. Well, if your scope is not tracking correctly, and say you're dialing up and to the left, now when you think you dialed back down to zero, you didn't come to zero. So if you didn't reconfirm,
you went down and to the right.
Yeah. So if you didn't reconfirm, and then the second half of the day you start at 500, 600, and so on, that's when the wheels fall off, and you see these guys that are all over the place, and they're really frustrated, and they're not doing anything wrong. You're giving the scope bad info, and it's there's nothing you can do about it at that point. So. All this stuff, it goes to your setup, and everybody obviously has different levels of access to gear, access to how far they can shoot, what the rifle setup is. There's so many factors in this, but just limiting the things that you can control, just taking whatever your setup is. If it's a 3 to 9 that's capped, and it's a 6.5 Creedmoor versus, you've got a 35X scope and, a 300 Weatherby that shoots super flat. Those are two wildly different setups, right? So trying to figure out what you said, the simplicity, that's in the moment. And seeing so many people who get really worked up, when you
some
finally...
people just get flustered. And that's okay. I think that's like a beautiful thing. It's so fun to see somebody's like, oh my gosh, I hunt with some people, turkeys that like have killed hundreds of turkeys, but every time they get close to a turkey, they almost just, I wonder if they're okay.
Yeah. I love that. And that's part of, I think, why we do it. But at the same time, the making it simple so that you have less things you can screw up.
Yeah. Well, let's move on past just the zero distance, but what does it take to get there? I mean, because we talked about a few things in there, what it takes to establish your zero, whether it's 100 or 300 or whatever.
We didn't talk about boresighting. So that is one common thing that I think we overlook. There's laser boresighters. There's a million ways to do it. I think the most consistent and easiest way is the old school, to look down the barrel at your target. If the barrel is pointing at whatever your target is, I like a white piece of paper when I'm at the range because it's easy to see through the barrel against usually what is like an OSB backdrop.
Yep.
If that's pointed, perfectly centered in the barrel, and then you look through your scope and you need to adjust that's what needs to move. And so you're trying to make those two meet, where the bore is center on the target and then the scope is center on the target. And that can be kind of a tough thing to do.
It can be.
What I like to do is shoot at 25. And so the first shot out of the gun, I'll go over to the short range. I'll line up that paper through the barrel and through the scope, and that's going to get me on paper. And so I'll shoot that first one, make sure everything's fine. As soon as I hit paper, I'm going to go over to the 100, have a pretty good idea of where I need to make my adjustments. I'll shoot a 3-shot group, make sure that, again, that's accurate info, and then I'll make my adjustments. I'm typically doing multiple guns at a time. So at that point, then I swap out so that I don't have a hot barrel, so that I'm not getting bad info either.
I do the same on the bore sight. I've used different tools. The laser that goes on the muzzle is nice, but then you got to make sure you take it off. There's a lot of I've never done that wrong, but it does make me nervous every time when you literally put it on the end of the muzzle.
Our friends from Caldwell, I've heard stories where they blow one off. Yeah,
I bet
it's better than in the bore though.
Yeah.
Yes, better than in the bore. But yeah, I think you got to get on paper, and then you can start to dial. But even in what you just talked about, you need some way to hold your rifle steady. So you need sometimes sandbags don't quite cut it even, because if you're trying to look down the muzzle with the bolt out, and then you try to you're doing the game down the muzzle, it's like you got to get back on it, and then you're looking through the scope. There's a little bit of movement in there. So having a lead sled or a Caldwell gun vise, something like that, to be able to hold it rock steady is the way to go.
We just we just ordered a few more. They're called the Rock BR from Caldwell, where it's not the lead sled where it has the hard back, but it's got the nice adjustment in the front. So I'd check one of those out. We just ordered 3 of them. So
the way you get to your adjustment too is I hear people do it both ways. The way that I do it is once I shoot and I see the point of impact where the bullet was, I move to there. So I don't go the other way. So I point at the bullseye, and if I shoot and I'm 2 inches right and 1 inch low, I'm going to move crosshairs from bullseye to 2 inches right and then low. Where I see people do it the other way, and the reason I don't like that is what you mentioned about the movement on the scope. So if you are going to adjust and you're, say, holding the top of the scope, trying to keep your gun as steady as possible, and you start turning that elevation turret,
it's impossible not to.
You move the gun a little bit, and then you go, oh, was that 8 clicks or what did I do? I've done that, and now you're like, well, now I got to start over. I got to shoot again, and it's just way too hard.
With the vise, you put it back to where your original aim point was, and then you dial
to there.
Yeah.
I've actually had good luck when, if you do have a buddy at the range, you hold the gun and then
That's
JD clicks it for me.
That's still hard.
Left. The other left.
Yeah.
Still hard. Okay. Let's talk about more of the ballistic factors then. What goes into establishing the zero? There's a lot to it.
So when you say...
Well, basically establishing your zero and then building a dope chart.
Oh, so that...
let's assume, you just shot it. You're dialed in at 100. Now, what info do you need to use?
So I'm pretending for this example that people don't have access to a chronograph or an Ayler system and all the stuff that we are very fortunate to have. So on the table, for those that aren't watching, there's 4 different boxes of ammo. This is a really good starting place regardless of brand. So this is a box of Hornady 6.5 Creedmoor 143 ELDX. Most all are going to have a muzzle velocity. Some are going to include your BC and which BC, so G1 versus G7. We can talk about that here in a second. But the other one that's important is barrel length. So not just all that other information. Did you do 100 or 200 yard or 300 yard zero? But are they basing that feet per second off of a 22, 24, 26 inch? Because that's obviously going to change your math. If you're basing it off of a 26 inch barrel, but your gun's a 22, it's not going to jive.
And that is a reference point.
Yep.
That is not, if you don't have a chronograph and you just take that for fact, you might end up getting a little bit disappointed because there is plus or minus bore diameters. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that goes into it. Even in that specific load itself could be slightly different. And at 100 to 300 yards, probably doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But you start getting past there, everything matters, and you probably really do need a chronograph.
For sure. The The BC, that's something that I think gets overlooked too, because there's a million ballistic calculators out there, and so I've downloaded and paid for a number of them.
Same.
The free ones I've been very happy with. I'll screw up the names of several of them, but like Bullet Drop is one.
That's the one I use.
The Hornady one's
free.
One's great. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
But using the correct BC for the type of bullet that you're using. So a G1 is meant more for a bullet that has just a flat rear. So, but if you're shooting factory ammo and you don't ever look at that and don't pay attention to the box and they don't have an example of that, you might choose the wrong one. A G7's meant more for, in air quotes, a boat tail, and bullets that are going to do better in the wind. So choosing the correct one for the type of bullet that you're shooting is going to be very critical in putting in the correct BC, because a G1 BC and a G7 are not going to match up. Now, there are ways to calculate that. You can Google, my BC is 0.50, G7, what is that in G1?
Yeah.
And it'll spit that out for you. But obviously, if you just start with the right one, that makes things easier.
Yeah, so if you don't know, BC is ballistic coefficient. It's basically the bullet's drag profile, or even more simply, is a measure of how aerodynamic that bullet is, how well it flies through the air, or how efficiently it flies through the air. So, chronograph, there's a lot of options out there.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are tough. I started out just using the Caldwell, the green Caldwell with the bunny ears coming out with the little white plastic thing between them.
I always felt like I was going to shoot it.
Yeah, doing that with archery too. That's fun.
Yeah.
But those are a little over $100.
Yeah.
And you're going to get good, reliable data out of there. The last year or so, I've been using the Garmin Zero chronograph, and that thing's pretty sweet. It's half the size of a phone, and you just set it on the table.
And it's dummy proof. It is not hard to use.
It's great.
Yeah.
And there's an app, you can log your shots, and it gives you some really cool info.
I've never used one, but Lab Radar, do they make a pretty quality one that's more on the upper end of pricing?
Yeah, and I haven't used one myself either, but the radar stuff kind of gets interesting, because it can give you data not just at the muzzle, but even further out, so you can kind of validate your math, which is nice. Doppler.
Size-wise, too, just like on a hunt, the Lab Radar is like tablet size-ish, so it's not too big to take, but, if it's a traveling hunt, that stuff can get tough, where the Garmin and the Athlon, I don't remember what that one's called, but I mean, it's phone size, so there's not really an excuse not to bring it if you're on a hunt and you're going to shoot again. Yeah,
the Garmin's a USB-C recharging cable, which most people have for their phone or somewhere, so it's just pretty simple to use, and it works great. The great thing about that is using a chronograph, you don't have to guess on the muzzle velocity on the box. Especially if most of the boxes out there are probably going to publish with a 24-inch barrel. So if you got a 20 or a 26 or just some other barrel length, then it's pretty nice. You don't have to guess. It's going to save you time.
Because the same thing I hear people say all the time, well, it's just 50 feet a second per inch. And it's like, well, for all calibers, for all bullet weights, that's a variable, right? So a good starting point is what the box says. And then you're going to either have to adjust up or down from there.
All right. I'm going to ask you this, JD, because you came from an optics company before joining Weatherby. Scope height over the bore.
That's another one people screw up, because like the default in most apps is going to be like 1.5 for rail mount range. So the scope height should be center of bore to center of scope. So not everybody's going to have calipers to measure. Right. And then when you're doing, just like when you're doing the sight in and you have the movement, when you got your giant tape measure.
And then are you going from the muzzle and you're trying to hold a tape measure, or are you going from the center of the turret down to what you think's the center of the barrel? So if I'm not, if I'm within a half inch, am I good enough?
I don't think so. But it does vary. Like I said, the default on a lot of apps is going to be like 1.5. And that's just a starting point. That's not just you should say, okay, I'm good. 1.8 for me for most scopes that are rail mount, and then 30 millimeter main tube and likely about a 50 millimeter objective. Just getting that measurement from the center of bore to the center of the scope, you're going to be really close. But again, that's something that I think we'll get to it, like truing your scope to the data that you have, because your environmentals change. The bullet's not always going to do the same thing at minus 30 and 10,000 feet as it is at 80 degrees and sea level. So just because your rifle's zeroed where you zeroed it doesn't mean it's going to be on whatever hunt you take it on, or for your entire season.
The environmental things can be tricky.
Very much. So we experienced that on a hunt a few years ago, where we built Tyler's dope chart before we left, and gun was shooting great. It was just spot on here when we left. And then we are ranging this bear, and his holdover in MOA on the chart that we printed was it was a full minute.
Yeah, it was something weird.
But
there was like
my binos. I use the Swaro EL range TAs, and I was like, dude, it's telling me a different number, and I would trust the binos because they have temperature and elevation built into them. So at your person, not back in Sheridan. We were in Montana, and elevation was different, temperature was different. But in the heat of the moment, when you're the one telling them to dial and shoot, it was oh man, I really hope this one's right.
Yeah, it was like an extreme case where it's like we're a couple thousand feet higher than what we sighted it in. I want to say that moisture was super high, and we were, it was not super far, but 400 or 500 yards, and we were using a really heavy bullet, so there was a lot of drop there. So, but we trusted the binos that had all of the, atmospheric data.
It worked perfect.
It worked perfect. Yeah. So,
but if we had trusted the chart from home, it would. I think it would have been a miss.
Well, that's one of the things I definitely wanted to talk about is when you talk about printing a dope chart, that's a moment in time and a moment in geography and a moment in weather, which is constantly changing. So it's very important when you're establishing your zero to record what your atmospherics were. So you need temperature, you need barometric pressure, and you need elevation. Hopefully wind is not a factor when you're zeroing in your rifle, but it will be potentially on your next shots. But you need a way to record those. I guess the cheapest, most basic way is, assuming everybody's got a smartphone, get out your weather app and look at. Usually there's so many airports across the country that are tracking barometric pressure. It's going to be close enough for where you're at there. I think the next level up, and kind of what you're talking about, is getting either range finding binos or like a Kestrel, where you can it does barometric pressure and wind speed and all that and temperature. If you don't have a good reference, you can't. I don't know if anybody that can guess barometric pressure that well.
There's
you can get close on temp.
In Onyx, though, you can use their weather that supposedly pulls from 3 different places and is going to give you more accurate,
kind
for
of like
the
a GPS average.
Yeah. Because I can hear the people now. I'm not going to buy range-finding binos. I don't have a ballistic calculator in my rangefinder. Just getting the best data that you can. So whatever your setup is, just try to accomplish the closest so that you're giving yourself the right data, because it's always bad data in, bad data out, right? So the closer you can get, so if like this example, if this box says 2700, but the gun's shooting 2650, and then you go and base everything off of 2700, and then you have environmentals that change, and it just starts compounding where you have a miss that afterwards you can't explain, and it's not really your fault. It was bad data from the beginning. So the closer you can get from the start, it's just like when we mount a scope, if it's all crooked to start, or, the gun wasn't level. There's a million things that the better you can from the beginning to start, it's going to make life easier.
And then it just keeps getting exponential too on distance. So again, some of those environmentals won't maybe matter at under 500 yards, under 400 yards.
100 yards, probably not a huge difference.
Yeah.
But once you start talking about 400 plus yards, if a 400 yard shot's an option, a 650 yard shot could be an option if there's a confident shooter, and then everything matters. And if you don't have the tools in the field that compensate for you, you got to be able to use an app or something that can make that dope chart compensating change in the field. You got to be in your app. Okay.
The dope chart.
It's now 30 degrees. It was 80 degrees when I left home. I'm now at 6,000 feet. I was at 600 feet when I left home, and here's the barometric pressure. So then it'll spit you out a new dope chart live, depending on current conditions.
Because that technology can kind of sometimes give you that false confidence too, to where you're like, hey, that elk's 650 yards, my dope chart, I'll just spin it and go, and then that's when you...
Worst case, you wound something, right?
Yeah.
Miss is tough, but wounding's worse. And the setting it up part, I just feel like that we skip over a lot of those things, because you go shoot and everything goes great. You go to the range and everything is dialed, and you hit your 0 to 100, and then you went ting, ting, ting out to whatever distance you decided to shoot to. But what you mentioned about the environmentals, I try to shoot at daylight when I sight in a rifle, because that's likely closest to temperatures that I'm going to get on the hunt. So if I can, right before the hunt, usually day or two before, likely to be pretty similar weather window, I will go at daylight and shoot, so that it's going to be, if you go shoot at noon and it's 70 degrees versus, daylight when it's here a lot of times closer to 0 during the fall or in the winter, you're going to get better info to put into your ballistic calculator. And then your dope card, I get people that are like, where do I put that? And it's like, I see people put them on their rifle all the time, but I carry my phone with me all the time because I'm using Onyx to navigate, and then I save that as my screensaver. And I'm not likely to lay down and take a shot, over 200 yards that I'm not going to be able to pull out my phone and look really quick.
Right, to do it fast.
Yep.
Yeah.
The other thing is, while you're hiking around, every time your phone opens up, when you check the time or whatever, I'm looking at my dope chart. So it's just reminders. Okay, 400 yards is blank MOA, to dial to. So it just is another reminder of keeping those numbers in your head, so that when you have that like split second opportunity, you can be on it.
Yeah. Trust but verify.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that.
It's good to practice. You got to validate your data, because sometimes you're setting something up, you plug everything in, you're good, 100 yards, awesome. 300 yards, you think you're good, so you're like, I'm pretty darn close. Then you're like 500 yards, and you're like, I'm off a couple inches. Well, sometimes, in my experience, there may be some inflated BCs out there. And we've got some tools that we can measure the BC of an actual shot here in our range. But typically, if you're like, man, everything was tracking, and then it's just the further I get, it's not. It's either going to be your BC's off, your muzzle velocity's off, or something. One of the factors is off somewhere.
Typically, if I just adjust muzzle velocity, so if I'm hitting low, say it starts at 400 yards, at 1, 2, and 3, you're dead on, but then you get to 4 and you're like several inches low.
Right.
Or the better way is to measure with your scope. So if it's in mils or minutes, measure that distance and come up that far, make another shot, and if it impacts where you want it to, then you just make that adjustment in your dope chart, and then it's fixed, and you can continue to do that.
You do that on velocity.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's just worked for me simplicity-wise. Before I'm leaving for a hunt, it's very rare that I'll go shoot, and as soon as I get out at distance, there's a time where I'm like, now something wasn't right. But not everybody has access to all the things that we do to set up a rifle. So for the guy that's just like, man, I'm going out and finding a piece of state land and throwing out a cardboard box and trying to get this done so that I can go hunting this weekend with limited tools, you can use just your box and the free ballistic app, and that's going to be a really good starting point. And then once you shoot at those further distances, you can true it. And when we say true it, we're just saying make your bullet hit where the dope chart says it should.
Yeah.
Don't listen to the app. If it's not hitting where it says, you don't have to go, well it says 6 minutes.
Guns broke.
Yeah.
It's all math. It's all math somewhere. You can't change gravity.
Yep.
So there's a lot to it. I think my biggest swing that I ever did, and probably also the most time that I was trying to get my rifle to as close to perfect as I could, was when I went to Kyrgyzstan, because we were potentially going to be hunting at or around 14,000 feet, and we're at 4,000 here in Sheridan. I'm like, okay, that's 10,000 feet difference, and it's going to be colder because this was an August situation, so it's going to be like 85 to 100 here, and I'm going to be probably at like 60 to 20 degrees, and that was probably my first trip with like really good binos, and that took all the guesswork out for me. And I didn't trust them at first, because you travel halfway across the world. You like, when you go to check your gun in at the counter, you're just like, oh, please be nice to her. You're like kind of like petting the case a little bit, like, come on, don't beat her up. And you're looking out the window and you see the guys handling the luggage, and generally they're pretty good, but you'll see something fall off. And you're like, oh my gosh, if this thing's on when I get there, it's going to be a miracle. But typically you go on a hunt like that, the guides and outfitters are going to have you do some verifying. And I remember my first shot to verify was 300 yards, and we just like shot some paper, and I was like dead on, but that was my 0. So I was like, I don't really fully trust that. 6.5 300. And then we just picked like a random rock on this cliff face. It was like 700 some odd yards, like 713, something weird. I just ranged it. I dialed my turrets to what it said it was. And I mean, if I was aiming for a rock the size of a quarter, I hit the middle of that quarter at like 713 yards. And that was very confidence inspiring. And I didn't do anything other than hit the button on my binos and then did what they said. And that was awesome.
What you skipped over that's really common, I think, is we're assuming everybody knows what your binos are telling you. So what you're describing, your binos are not just ranging how far it is. They're measuring the angle compensated distance, and then they're telling you the dope in MOA or mil.
In that situation, I was aimed up a fair amount.
Yep.
Yeah.
But then it's giving you a third number that's going to say in MOA or mil what to dial the scope to. That's what is, it's doing all the math for you, and it's removing those steps instead of having to try to calculate that with your reticle or, a chart.
Yeah. There's a lot going on. But some of those tools are expensive. Like you get the really nice range finding binos are north of $2,000.
Yep.
But it does save. If you can afford it, get them.
Yeah, 100%. But for the guys that aren't, there's still rangefinders that have all that capability. So you can still get the correct math, and it not be $2,000-$3,000 for you to have access to it.
Let's talk about wind. That one's hard.
It is unbelievably hard. Anybody who has this figured out, I mean, we were shooting the other day, and with several different groups and different experience levels, and it was a great example of what wind is doing right where you're shooting versus down the canyon versus across the canyon, and then where the targets are. We had several times where it was literally opposite directions, where it's blowing left to right where you are and right to left out there.
Variable winds are the worst.
So that what you mentioned about a tool like a Kestrel, a lot of the apps too will just have, you can plug in a wind variable, so you can just put a 5 or a 10 for your wind value. Because they're so variable, I don't like to mess with that. I also don't like to dial wind. I like to hold using the reticle for wind. I'm typically not shooting, definitely not at critters where I'm going to need to dial. It's not going to be so much of a wind call.
10 MOA of wind. You're like,
yeah. But it's just a really difficult thing to account for. And the easiest way when we're like at a range is to have somebody shoot, and then they say they hit on the right edge of the target, and you tell them to use their reticle to measure how far that is, and then say it's just for ease sake 10 MOA, you would move over the 10 MOA to account for that wind. But the other thing we talked about when we were shooting was how quickly you do that, because just because the wind call was that way on that previous shot does not mean it's going to be for number 2 or any shots after that. So sometimes it feels like the person who's calling for you is trying to get you to hustle up, and they are, because they're trying to give you an accurate wind call. Because if they give you a 10, that's an extreme example obviously, but whatever wind call they give you, if you shoot now the wind dies, then now you missed again and you're frustrated and you'll just chase it. So that to me is the toughest variable when you're shooting, especially anything at distance.
My Kestrel probably won't like me for saying this, but that tool is not the easiest tool to use if you don't know.
Yeah, it takes some learning. I mean,
you can't just like get it in the mail on a Friday and then go hunt on Saturday and be like, oh, I got my wind. Like you need to spend some time with that thing. Yeah. It's an amazing tool, but it's not that intuitive.
No.
You need some time to practice on that thing.
But that's back to your setup. Like if you're going to be taking shots at distance where you need to use a Kestrel, I think they're a great tool for setting up a rifle for practice. For those that shoot where you need them in a hunting scenario, to me, that whole time you're gathering all that info, all I want to do is try to get closer. And I know everybody has an opinion on that, but for me, I just don't I try to limit my shots to where the animal doesn't have time to take a step. If they do, then that's a variable I can't control. So there's things with wind and all those things we talked about, setting up the rifle, that there's variables. If I can remove the bullet flight time where they don't have the opportunity to take a step where now I hit them in the guts, I want to remove that. I want to be able to take a shot where if I have some fudge room and I'm still going to hit in those vitals.
Yeah. To me, I guess in like previous experience, a real world measured like 10 mile per hour wind, I think that gets tricky because it's hard to be like, is that 5? Is that 15? Because you're 10 sometimes, if it's like the right direction, maybe it feels like 20. And you're like, man, it's just so windy.
Yeah, and the angle too, right? Because it's very rarely where it's just coming perfectly right to left, or there's always going to be some cant to it, and then you have to account for that. It's not just a 10 mile an hour. Now if it's off a little bit, then you have to take away from that.
That comes back to the practice at the range. I'm a big fan of using a dynamic dope chart. So like one of the apps where you can plug in the wind direction. The Hornady app, and I've used Straylock before. I use the Leica binos, and
theirs is applied ballistic, so they have a good one.
In their app, it's like a clock, and you can select which direction on the clock that the wind direction's coming from. Is it like a 7 o'clock to where your shooting position? So it's kind of like quartering 2, and then you can manually put in the wind, or you can kind of pull like a average GPS weather wind. And it's the hardest part for me, like when you start talking about shooting past 500 yards.
Yeah. It's like when in doubt, when you're hunting, just get closer. Mm-hmm. But maybe another tip would be, instead of on the weekend when it's windy, wanting to stay in the house when it's nice and calm, go find practice. Some rocks and just really see how your bullet is affected. Right?
The other thing I think people overlook is like shooting with a 22 and having to deal with that compensation, that you are having to dial so much because it needs so much compensation. That's a great thing to go practice with on the weekends where you're like, it's super windy and I'm having to account for all this drift, either wind or elevation. That's where you're going to start to figure out some of these drops and stuff that, what we didn't talk about was using your reticle yet, as opposed to a turret. You have, most scopes now are going to have both options, and rarely does it work out where however the hash marks or dots or whatever
I
your
just
scope
wasn't
looks,
going to talk about that. I'm just kidding.
but rarely does it work out where it's perfect yardage, where it's like use 0 to 100 and the next line down is 200 and 300 and so on. It's usually going to be like 100 yards 0, then 237, 348. And these numbers where you start, it's not intuitive in the moment to just go, okay, third one down, boom. So if you don't have time to dial knowing what those are, well, you need to go shoot those and say 237, well, that's closer to 250. So I'm going to use that as like if it's 250, you have to think about those things and have your setup dialed to where if you get that shot at a buck that's one step away from going in the timber and you're never going to see him again, to be able to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
We did it the other day, but I like having people run their turret out as far as they can. So like out at the ranch, we'll shoot out to 1,000. But then if you can have people do it with their reticle and have to use those numbers and figure out what they are, because one of the examples, the first hash mark isn't always like 1 MOA. That first one might be 2, and then it's 1 MOA spacing from there. But you could do your math wrong in the moment that center point, if it's a cross or a dot, you need to know what those measurements are. So it's important to look at your spec sheet of a reticle on your scope and be familiar with it.
I actually Googled it before this meeting, and there are 17 trillion different reticles.
17 trillion. Then it's also just known first focal and second focal plane to make sure that your reticle's even correct, right?
Yeah.
You might,
Yeah.
like if you're a newer shooter and you're shooting second focal plane, and you're like, oh, I'm at
8
power, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I was using 2 down.
No,
So-
there are so many reticles. That's a whole nother thing, first
Yeah.
and second focal plane. And I've been joking about third focal plane. But yeah, no, there's
April 1st of next year, we're launching a third focal plane scope. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot. What it comes down to, I think, is get confident in your 0. Feel really good that you're as close to 0 as possible. Do you ever do offset?
For like left,
Mm-hmm.
I have. If we're going to shoot, if I know we're going to shoot to a mile, then yes, I've done that, but not typically. If I,
Because that's advanced level.
yeah, if you're accounting for I always say it wrong.
Coriolis.
Coriolis. I always want to say Coriolis. I don't know why.
Well, like sometimes you can't get it with your quarter MOA clicks. Sometimes you can't move it that quarter inch, or you might be like stuck in the middle.
Yeah. If I had to be, I'd rather be left,
Yeah.
to start, but I just feel more confident. If I hit the center, then
Yeah.
I feel really good.
Then you're good. But feel really good about your 0. Then start to move wherever your range will allow you. Move past that and validate your dope to where your next yardage line is. And then just keep moving back and watching the environmentals. Practice. Not just your scope setup, but I used to talk about this a lot in pistols. People go to the range, they stand perfectly square to a target. They use 2 hands, perfect shooting form, and they are awesome at hitting the target only when doing that. I don't know a single defensive shooting scenario where you have the time to draw, settle, remain perfectly square to the target, and then you can fire. If you're in a firefight, you're probably like running, shooting behind you basically because you're like one-handed and you're trying to flee, hopefully, and nobody practices that.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you do, like in a USPSA, it just you watch people do a match for the first time, and they just almost every time you just see like humility set in because you're like, oh my gosh, this is hard. This is so hard. Well, I think hunting's the exact same thing. Is you go to the range, you've been doing all this effort on practicing getting your scope set up, getting your dope right. You're on a lead sled. I don't put that on my backpack. And you go out and you're like, whoa, how am I supposed to build a shooting position now? I don't have a lead sled. And I think so many people forget about that part. You need to be able to shoot prone, shoot off a bipod if you're using a bipod, in a less than stellar position that's not flat, because where I hunt's never flat.
Yeah.
And use your pack. Practice.
Those are all things you can do too without shooting. You can do that in your living room and getting familiar with the magnification on your scope, with the parallax on your scope. If you have illumination, how that works.
Dry fire practice.
Dry fire. And that's something that I think people don't do enough. We talked about it the other day when we were shooting that obviously don't like point at your neighbor's house and make things weird when you're doing dry fire practice, but get to a safe place and get to where you have your pack on just like you would when you're hunting, and take it off and try to get, sit down and get yourself in a position where you could shoot. And you're going to start figuring out stuff pretty quick where it's like, I suck at this. I need to get better at getting everything started. Another big mistake I see people make, and not just the dialing the turret past, out to 1,000 and leaving it, but leaving their magnification on max.
Yeah.
So you go out in the field, it's dark, you hiked in for an hour. Elk finally steps out and you're on 24 power or whatever. I like to run mine at about 8. So I like 3 to 18-ish scopes, but I still run mine when I'm walking around at about 8 because it's still enough. If I have to take a quicker shot, then I can still do that, but it's not too much that if something's close. But everybody's going to find that's the kind of stuff you need to figure out before you're in the field, not during, because when that, big buck steps out or whatever, that's not the time.
I would say do all that, except go run around the block before you start.
Yeah, that's great.
Because almost
do
every
some
time
push-ups,
you're not coming into this at a resting heart rate of whatever 60 beats per minute. You're probably at like 140 because you even if you're not running anywhere, you're in you could be in a tree stand. I think if you're like us or like me, you're going to get excited. You're like, buck of a lifetime steps out, that heart starts beating, and you're like, oh man, whoa. You don't think the same.
Yeah. But making it simple. The more familiar you are with your setup, so that if you need to change your magnification, if you need to dial your turret, anything that you're going to need to mess with, you need to be so confident that you can do it in the dark or, with your eyes closed, so that you can make that happen in the moment instead of going, I should have checked how this worked.
Yeah. I think one of the things I also wanted to bring up is have a backup, because it depends on how you hunt and what kind of hunt you're on. But if you're in the mountain, maybe you're 4 days into a 3-day hunt and your phone's dead and you only have your dope on your phone.
That's a great point.
That sucks. So having a backup is good, whether it's a printed card where at least you're going to be close, whether it's a phone and your binos, whether it's your binos plus an extra battery. Range finding binos chew through batteries. Like carry an extra, if it's a CR123 or a CR2, whatever it is, carry an extra one.
I always send my dope to my buddy too, because a lot of times he's going to be spotting for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's nice to know, have him calling, especially if you get into like, hey, you're coming up on an elk herd, you bump him and he's moving. It's pretty nice to have those dope numbers getting called out for you.
Yeah. There's a couple other nice to haves I wanted to mention. A spotting scope with a reticle is amazing at the range. If your spotter can be like, hey, you're 3.5 MOA to the right, and in your, or mills, whichever you're shooting, the MOA or mills, and you can just easily just make that adjustment. It makes calling it so much easier. If you have a target that has a grid that's measured, awesome. But if you're just shooting at steel and you're like, I don't know, it's like a Coke can to the left. Was it horizontal or vertical?
Yeah. Being on the same page too with whoever you're with, that's a really important one. So going over, I like to, like, as you're taking off for the day, talk about like, hey, if I'm giving you a range or if I'm giving you a number, that's what to dial your turret to. That's not range. That's not angle compensated range. That means MOA or mills or whatever you're shooting in, so that we're speaking the same language. So it's a really quick back and forth. How far is he? 8. And that's all you need to know. Be on the same page so that it's you're not going, wait, 800 yards or 8 MOA or what are you saying?
There's a lot to it. And practice. The last thing I started to talk about it, go to a PRS match or NRL hunter. Those are very intimidating feeling, but I can tell you that they're also very inviting communities. If you go and like say, hey, this is my first match, and you tell your squad that, you're going to get so much help if you want it. 98% of the people out there are super inviting. They're really helpful. It's a lot. Like going to your first match is intimidating, but you will learn so much by just the practice that's involved in that, because you got to do it all on the fly. and you got a bunch of people behind you watching you screw up,
Yeah.
and it'll make you better.
Shooting schools too, those are great, and everybody that's going to a shooting school is trying to learn too, so maybe that for some people is less intimidating, but I've got to go to quite a few, and I've learned a lot because you have so many different people there from different backgrounds, and you're kind of able to cherry pick from each one of them. So same thing, people are very supportive at those because you know that everybody's there to try to get better and be more proficient next season.
What else did we leave out, Tyler?
I think we got a lot of. There's just a lot there, so I think we covered a lot of a big breadth of that. So, I think the biggest takeaway for me from this one is just being confident in what the tools that you do have, and then slowly upgrade as you can.
Yeah, if you've got a $100 scope from Walmart from the 80s, that's awesome. Throw it on your rifle and get familiar with it. You could get a good shooter that knows this setup with that scope that could do a whole lot better than somebody that has no clue what they're doing with a $2,000 scope setup that will do everything for you, but you still have to know how to tell it the right info.
Exactly.
So know your setup,
Yeah,
for sure. Couple things before we wrap this fully up. We got a film festival coming up August 1st, Friday, here in Sherrodice. We'd love to have you come join us. How can people get tickets to that?
It's on the YO Theater box office. So if you just Google the YO Theater, there'll be a link, and you'll be able to find the 3rd annual film festival from Weatherby. So it's gonna be cool. We've got some fun people showing up to it. Remy Warren's gonna be there with the film for sure, and then we're still maybe 50-50, but Casey from Hush, I think he's gonna come too. So we're gonna have some fun people. And
You said it now, so if he doesn't come,
Well, it's on him.
Yeah.
If he wants to look bad, he can.
yeah,
The historic YO Theater downtown Sheridan is awesome. We're going to be shutting the street down right beside it. Have some food trucks ahead of time. Should be a really fun time. Should have some live music. It's going to be great.
yeah, and we'll have it'll be kind of like if you've ever been to one of the banquets or something, because we're gonna have a bunch of conservation organizations there. Like we did this last year. Each of them will have some kind of gun or something to give away, so you'll get to play raffle games and all that stuff. Last year, we made almost about $40,000 for conservation.
Yeah, we don't.
So,
we lose money on this deal. This is not a profit center for us, but this is a fun thing, and it's really cool to do. So,
yeah, and just a little tip: I would get tickets earlier this year. Last year, we did almost sell it out, and we did it on a Wednesday night. So this year, it's on a Friday night. We're starting it at 4, so there'll be a true atmosphere before.
it's gonna be fun.
So it should be a good time.
It's going to be fun. If you don't care about the Bighorn Trail Race and hearing an update about that, you can hang up your phone now or stop the podcast. But months ago, Tyler and I were dumb enough to talk each other into doing the 52-mile trail race. And we were debating with our wives on Saturday after finishing the race, or not, about whose idea it was first. And each of our wives had a different version of the story. And I'm like, I honestly don't remember whose idea it was initially to do the 52.
I thought you talked Tyler into it.
No, that's what I was telling everyone. I'm pretty sure it was actually me.
And I told my wife, Tyler talked me into it. So they're like, which is it?
Yeah, I think the true story is we briefly talked about it about it before a podcast, and then we're like, let's do the 52 on the podcast.
We just got excited and committed to it. Anyway, over the last months, we've been training a lot. I feel like I'm probably in the best physical shape I've been in since my 20s, and I'm 43 now. So it's been awesome, just like getting your gun ready in the preseason, getting ready for hunting season. I feel like I'm already in mountain shape, and I still got months to go, so I'm excited by that. But I wanted to talk a little bit about that. And JD, you did the 18. Your wife talked you into doing the 18. You're an idiot too.
First and last. I did do it, and I officially retired immediately.
Yeah.
So we got done.
So if you don't know, the Bighorn Trail Race takes place in the Bighorn Mountains right out here, not technically in Sheridan, but Dayton, I guess, would be the closest town. There's 4 distances. You can do 100 miles, 52 miles, which Tyler and I did. 32 and the 18 is the shortest, which is no joke. I've done the 18 several times, and it's hard because it's essentially downhill for 18 miles. Tough.
There's a lot.
So I had to withdraw 34 miles in. My left knee just did not want to function as a knee anymore, and it wanted to function more like a shin, where it would not bend. And I was really frustrated. I was pretty down in the moment of it, just like when it hit me that I was probably going to have to withdraw. I made the cutoff, so there's like cutoffs at different check stations, and I was comfortable from a cutoff perspective, but I was just like, I can't keep going, and I could probably walk this last 18 miles, and I might make the cutoff, but it's going to be really hard based on the last 3 miles, my mile pace. It's like, I have till 8 p.m. It's like, I think I need till 10, and that's going to suck.
Yeah. For that race, though, at mile 34, which it's crazy to say 34 miles, right?
Yeah.
You're already at 6,000 feet of elevation gain. That doesn't even include the loss.
6,000 up and 9,000 drop.
Yeah. So if you're like putting that in perspective to a hunt, I mean, that's more than you would do in a week of hunting.
There's a lot in a day, and the continued downhill. So the 52, we ran like the first 10, 11 miles, like pretty much we're talking, hanging out. Like
yeah, it was great.
It was actually super fun. It was crazy foggy. It was beautiful. Feeling good the first 18, but it is a runnable 18 miles downhill. I say runnable because it's not so steep that you can actually keep a decent stride, and it wasn't so technical in most places that you could keep a stride. Some places it kind of be switchbacky or it'd be rocky enough that you couldn't really run. You kind of have to dodge around rocks. But for the most part, it's 18 runnable miles to start.
And we were running, 9.5 minute mile up to about 12 and a half on some of the more rocky spots. So
yeah, I think my worst split on the first 18 was like a 15-minute mile, but I had to stop to pee.
Yeah. So, yeah, the first 18 miles went down great. I was feeling crazy good. So,
and then that's you get into this major aid station. It's called Sally's Footbridge. One of our ballisticians, Alex, was there, and he was so helpful. It was like so cool to see him. And you got there before me, but
yeah, it was like one of the biggest morale boosts of the entire trip, because that was going to be for us, it was going to be like we weren't going to have crew, so we weren't going to have anyone at the aid station helping us, switch shoes and do all this stuff. But as soon as I rolled in, Alex goes, "Tyler," I'm like, "Alex, what are you doing here?" And then he stayed with me that whole time. I was probably in and out of that aid station 5 to 7 minutes, somewhere in there. I was in and out, but some gal came up, grabbed my water bottles, filled those up, and then Alex was just putting food in my chest rig and all that stuff. I was like, this is awesome.
That is awesome.
So he was a big help there. So
yeah, because you just did 18 miles, and it's like, I just want to sit down for a second. And he's like, here, you sit here, have a seat. I'll go get your bag, because you have a drop bag that's there ahead of you. I changed shoes, socks. I cleaned my feet off because my feet were muddy. Yeah, it was kind of gross.
I switched shoes there.
Yeah, and I got like a fresh tune-up, feeling good, and departed. And the next portion, the next 16 or so miles to the next major check station, is you start off 3.5 miles straight up. We call it there's 2 walls. This is like the big wall.
Yeah,
and
there's 1 mile in there that has over 600 elevation gain in a mile.
It's hard. And it had been really cool all morning. The heat got me a little bit on that climb. It was hot.
Yeah. The uphill for me was where I was worried. So when I got out, I actually was doing much better at that point than I was anticipating. So my pace through there was actually really good. I was feeling good. My joke to you guys is as soon as I started my climb, Creed came on the headset and it was higher. So I was like, I gotta climb higher. So that was another. It's just funny, when you're in your own head that whole time, because you're kind of doing this by yourself. We got to run together for a little bit, but
once you get 10 miles into a long race like that, you're just so strung out on the trail that you're kind of solo.
Yeah, so your mind, you're trying to play all these little scenarios in your head, and that was one of them. It's just this is a morale boost. So I think I did that mile extremely fast for that section.
I guess I should have done some Creed. I don't know. I struggled with that part. It got hot. But it still felt pretty good coming into bear camp, and then bear camp to cow camp, I started slowing down, feeling it a little in my knee, and then cow camp to Dry Fork, which Dry Fork's 34 and a half miles in. Wheels fell off the bus for me. I'm like, I could barely walk, let alone try to run, and I just kept trying to talk myself into like, it's just weakness leaving my body. Like, it's no big deal, and I just couldn't overcome it. And I was like,
that was my first time ever doing something that big and kind of grand, I guess, because there's moments in there when it's like, oh, I felt good after doing that big vertical up, and you're at mile 22 or 23. You're like,
I'm not even halfway.
30 miles.
I'm not
still.
halfway. I had the same thought. I'm like, I'm 25 miles in and I'm not halfway. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. So there's just a lot of like little crazy, you kind of find out what you're made of in there. It's just because you're just thinking about everything that whole time. Like, It's pretty crazy. So, but yeah, I got to the Dry Fork in really good shape, I think. So Kobe was there helping work the aid station. Savannah, my fiance, was there helping me too. But Kobe comes up with the camera. I go, I feel great. My legs aren't going fast. like my mind and my spirit, I'm like, this is great. But so I was feeling it at that similar time, but had made it within where I wanted to be pace-wise.
What time did you get to Dry Fork?
1:30.
Oh, that's pretty good. I was an hour behind you. I was 50 minutes behind you. I got there at 2:20.
Our buddy Logan also ran it, which is kind of funny. Like, I didn't see him after mile 3, but we were essentially 15 minutes apart that whole time.
Oh, you just stayed. He pulled ahead, but then you stayed with him. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like they're like, oh, he just left Dry Fork, and I was pumped for that. And then, when we finished, we were within 17 minutes of each other, but we never saw each other.
Yeah,
which is kind of crazy.
It's a hard race. And
it is.
From Dry Fork, so I withdrew at Dry Fork. I made the cutoff. If I had been there 30 minutes earlier, I may have tried to go on, but I needed 6 hours to be able to walk it out at a 20-minute pace, and I didn't have it. And I also didn't have it.
I got a little bit of a burst at Dry Fork knowing that Logan was just in front of me, and then getting to see the whole crew, and they were pumped, and I was feeling good. So that first, I think, 5 or 6 miles out of Dry Fork, I was cruising, feeling good.
Did you get to see Tripp there too then?
Yeah, I got to see Tripp.
Yeah.
And
that's my son.
Yeah. Luke's son was going to pay someone for the 100. So I was kind of like, I had saw them at like 10:30 though. So I was like, I don't know if they're going to make it but Travis kicked it into high gear. Good job, Travis. Yeah. Anyway, so I was feeling good the first 5 or 6 miles, and then all of a sudden that's when
your struggle bus started.
When my wheels fell off. It's just like things that you think should hurt end up not hurting in the race, and then you just have like completely other muscles that just start like not working. My nutrition was good. I stayed hydrated, and the year before I had severe cramps, like terrible muscle cramps. This year didn't have that, but stayed on top of my electrolytes and all that good stuff. But it was just weird mentally. It's like I just can't run. I'm like, I want to run, but I can't. And then the downhill on that last half of the race is pretty brutal.
It is.
So I couldn't really run. But then again, it's just, I think the thing that I learned the most from the ultra is just, it's honestly a mental game the entire time. It's like figuring out if you're hurt, like, do you have a cyst in your knee that's now making your knee not move? Or does it just hurt? Because then the last 5 miles of the race, which is one of the hardest spots for a lot of people, because it's like you hit the road, there's no downward momentum. Brutal. And it's usually hot. This year it wasn't hot on the road. But I started out where it's like I was walking 20-minute miles for 8 miles. Like, so the end of the race was like half of my race. The last 18 took almost the same amount as the first 34, which is actually kind of crazy.
That is crazy.
Because it took me like 6 hours to finish it, and I did 13 total.
Yeah.
So it's like, geez, I didn't even think of that until just now, that it's like the last 18 was almost double the race. Yeah. So anyways.
We did the first 18 in 4 or a little less than.
Yeah. Yes. I came in at like 3.5.
Yeah.
And then it was 4.5, and then like 6. So maybe not that much, but anyway, but like the way your body can just overcome things. So I got on the road. I'm like, I'm going to have to, like, looking at the cutoff time, it's like, oh, I'm going to make it if I just walk these next 5 miles at a 20 pace. So I'm like walking, and then I jokingly said, there's some badass soccer moms out there, but a soccer mom passed me walking. I was walking, and she was walking way faster than me. I'm like, no. I was like, no. So she paced me. I was like, well, I'm just going to walk as fast as she is. And I'm like, she's walking like a 15 to 16 minute mile. Like she was power walking. And all of a sudden it's like my legs started feeling better. And I looked down. I was like, ooh, that was a good one. It was a 15-minute mile. And then I just started, it's like, I'm going to try to run. It hurts. The saying that we learned, it's like, does it hurt to walk? Yeah. Does it hurt to run? Yeah. Well, you should probably just run then. So then I just started running, and it's like my right leg, that was what was hindering me on the downhill.
It's fine.
Just stopped hurting.
Yeah.
Don't know why. And yeah, I was able to do a 12-minute mile and then a 10-minute mile. And
That's insane.
Then run like as
mile 50 of 52 was like a 10-minute mile.
Mile 52 was a 10:24 mile.
That's nuts.
And then as like there's like a little half mile at the very end. I like looked down at my watch. It's an 8.5-minute mile, and I'm sprinting in after 52 miles. And it's so to me, it's just like, okay, it's just like a whole different. You just gotta
awesome.
Put pain.
You crushed
out.
it.
So it's like it was like a very cool like experience to be like hard things. Like from the 32, I had a terrible I did a 32 mile, and like that was like one of the hardest things I'd ever done. And
Last year.
Yeah. And then last fall I killed a bull like 7 or 8 miles deep, and that was the hardest thing I'd done. And I can say the 52 was harder than packing out that bull.
Yeah.
So
dude, I'm proud of you, man. You crushed it.
I appreciate that. It was like
it.
I just feel like even like learning so much, not just race day, like running so much, putting in time, commitment, all the things, and like having something to look forward to.
You have to practice eating, like for real, to get enough calorie intake to really be able to finish that a race of that length. You got to manage your water. You got to manage your calories. You got to manage your feet. Like there's a lot that goes into it, and everything's got to go right.
Yeah. Oh, the feet thing, that was kind of funny too. It's like I had blisters on my feet when I finished that I didn't notice because I think other things were hurting more. Like I had multiple blisters on my toes and my ankle, didn't even feel it while I was doing it.
It's wild.
So it was pretty cool. I think I'm going to try do it again for sure. But I feel like I get addicted to like the weird highs and lows that like a trail race brings. Like there was at one point that I'm like, I'm not finishing, to like then running at the end.
Yeah. I kind of vlogged along the way, like I have some of it was on my phone, and then I put my GoPro on my trekking poles, and I would just kind of do like, if there's a cool spot or do a little update. And when I realized that I wasn't going to make it, like I had this like emotional low where I'm not like a crier. Like my wife probably seen me cry like 2 times ever in 22 years of being married. My kids, I'm just generally not emotive, but like I lost it, and I'm like, this is just a run. Like who cares? But it was more like I had invested so much to get ready, and it like realizing it wasn't gonna like come to pass. I was like, oh, this is just like a left unturned. It's gonna bother me. So I don't know for sure what I'm gonna do yet, but I got to figure out.
I think that's what I love though. It like breaks you down a little bit, kind of shows you who you are. So like that competitive spirit in you, you're like, yeah, usually I don't get emotional, but then it's like you're putting that thing that you worked really hard for, and it doesn't always come out.
My eyes started sweating. It's weird.
I'm kind of I get emotional every once in a while, but I will say I'm 2 for 2 in ultras of crying as well. Like, like I don't know what it does. It just puts you in this weird mindset. Like what made me cry was like Neil Young, Old Man came on I'm like thinking about my dad when I'm running. I'm like, what is going on? I think I ran a really fast mile that time, but it was like happy tears. It was weird.
Yeah.
But it was like, it just weirdly opens you up. I don't know.
That was your first like big run, not like of.
Yeah.
You did 18, JD, right? So before that, what was your longest run ever?
13. We ran 3 training runs that were 13.
Yeah. And before that, What was your long?
Like 2. I hate running. So,
But like you work out a lot. It's not like you just
I just don't like
stepped off the
distance
couch.
running. Yeah.
Yeah, collegiate athlete, D1 football player. Like you're not like I said, you're not.
I think
out
I'm
of
still, even at 38, I think I'm still better at sprinting than I am at distance running, though.
So the 18's hard because that would have been the last 18 of Tyler's race, and basically you started where I withdrew, but I've done the 18 a few times. It's a hard race.
Yeah.
What was your take?
I think I don't like not knowing. Like I've joked with you guys. We did quite a few training runs together. If you tell me we're running 100 miles, I'm in. If you tell me we're running 3 and you try to get me to run 3.1, I want to murder you. I'm not in for the 0.1. I have to know.
Yeah.
Well, the training runs, because of the snow and everything, we never ran
Past that.
Yeah,
spot.
we couldn't get that. So that first part, just not knowing what it is,
Right.
where we started in
So
the
you
pack.
really only knew you had to basically go nearly 10 miles before you actually recognized anything on the course.
Well, and my wife maybe lied to me a little bit. She said there was aid stations every 2 miles. And so
it's more than that.
Yeah, so the first one's at like 6.
It's a little ways.
Yeah, so
it's at
just
6.
stuff like that I would have prepped different. I would not have brought in a full water bladder because I finished with like a quarter of my water bladder still because I was drinking at aid stations and stuff too. But the whole point was just to run it with my wife. She did it last year. She crushed it. She did 15 minutes faster this year. Afterwards,
With you in tow.
Yeah, she texts screenshots of our times because like we crossed the finish line with the kids, and hers was like whatever 0.05 seconds faster. So she sent that to everybody like I beat him, I crushed him.
So you gonna try the 32 next year?
I will not do a race ever again. I committed the moment we finished. I got in the creek right there, and I told my wife, "I'll take you on any vacation you want. I do not want to do this again."
Funny.
And I think she's already made vacation plans.
So JD did not catch the ultra bug.
No, not even a little bit.
I'm like told myself I'm not gonna decide what I'm gonna do for next year. I will do something. My middle daughter is expressing interest in maybe doing the 18 next year, which I would love to do with her if she's ready. If she's not, I don't know if I try the 52, go to the 32. We talked about the 100. I don't know.
I don't know either right now. It's too soon to tell. But
because I'm retired, I'm not going to give any advice. I just feel like I'd be out of place.
I'm gonna do the 100, and I'm gonna ask JD to be my pacer, and so then he'd have to run.
I would absolutely pace you at the Dayton Park. Right?
I will get you the last 100 yards.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, I don't know what I want to do. It was funny. My fiance Savannah was like, "You're not skipping a year." And I was like, "What?" She's like, "You're signing up next year." That was badass. I was like, "Sweet." So I'm gonna do something too. Don't know.
Yeah, even after withdrawing, like you go to the park, and I came to the park like not in a great mental space because I was disappointed. I felt like a quitter. But you get there and you're seeing all these people crossing the line that are just at that point. It's late in the day, so it's people finishing the 52 and the 100-mile race, and like almost all of them are crying at the finish line. Like you're just like, I just did this monumental thing, and the camaraderie at the park. It's like just a big party in a public park afterwards. Everybody's positive, like, dude, you crushed it. It's a really fun atmosphere, and I'm like, okay, I'm not giving up. I got to keep going.
I think it's contagious too. How many we had like 1 or 2 Weatherby guys. Like Cobb's like, I want to do something. Sean wants to do something.
Then.
Like there's a bunch of guys who are like, oh, and then like just some of the guys working the aid stations are like, I never really even thought about running, but you guys did it, so like. Maybe I should try it. I'm like, you should.
Yeah, you can do it. Anybody can do it.
Yeah. I just saw you out there running, Tyler. And man, if you did that, then I would have to be able to do it.
No, Tyler, you're not to sound offensive at all, but you don't have like your typical ultra runner body build. Like you've got a pretty low BC.
My BC would be like a 0.2 or something like that.
But not from a fat perspective. You just have a lot of muscle mass.
Yeah. Well, we've been kicking around talking about the 100 and stuff, and I'm not saying no to that or yes to it. But like if I wanted to do something like that, I would have to like truly dive all in, because like I'm either going to do the 52 again, but I want to run a race where it's like the wheels don't fall off. I want to run a good race.
You want to feel really good about it.
So, and especially on something like the 100, like I would not, like, it's like, I feel like I'm going to like say I'm going to do the 100, but when it goes to sign up, it's like, oh, well, my body would have to change to do that. Because a lot of it was not muscle related. We were talking about this. For me, it was from the knee down, and that's joints and all the things and less muscle. It's just pounding, right?
You shed 25 pounds, and that takes a lot of that away.
Yeah. So
yeah,
maybe I will become a runner one day. We'll see. But you guys should see my photos. I had everyone was making fun of my goofy compression socks, but
hey, you finished 52 miles. You'd be like, hey, you do it.
Yeah. So I wore these like knee-high white socks to like, because my calves are pretty big. You'd think that'd be good. For me, it's the Achilles heel because like I cramp so bad. So I wore those and had no issues. So
it's awesome.
But yeah.
Congrats, man.
Thank you.
Super cool.
Good on you both. I mean, it was a big accomplishment for both of you. And watching you guys train as hard as you did was cool.
Yeah, and I think last takeaway, from a perspective from you, Luke, I think it's cool to do hard things. And like you have kids. I don't have kids yet. But like to then see Tripp, who was out there doing something hard too. He was pacing a 100-miler. I think when you do hard things and show your kids that you can do hard things.
Yeah.
Tripp didn't do that because you told him to do it. He did it because he wanted to do that. You know, so I think
there's not a lot of 16-year-old kids that want to go for fun, run 18 miles. The thing that JD's like, I will do almost anything else.
And there's no glory. Like Tripp did it to help somebody.
Tripp did not cross the finish line. Like, he could have, but he's like, I didn't want to get in this picture. That's cool. Dude,
so
that's cool.
I thought that was pretty amazing, but I do think that's kind of like the example thing though too, and like the culture, family culture, the culture thing in the sense of like, it's good to do hard things, and sometimes you might do everything right. You trained hard, and anything can happen, and you still might not hit your goal, or there'll be a day when it is your day to hit the goal. So.
Withdrawing at 34 miles is a bummer, but I would 100% rewind and have done it all again in hindsight, even knowing I wouldn't have finished. But there's been no, other than the knee pain, there's no downside. Like, I'm in great shape. We talked with Weston from Mountain Tough a few weeks ago, like that kind of stay dangerous mentality. Like, I could get a call tomorrow and be like, hey, we're going to Nepal and we're going to hunt at 28,000 feet. That's extreme. But like, all right, I'm ready. Let's go. Like, I just, that part feels really good. And like, that's the reason where I'm like, I'm not giving up. I want to keep going. I'm in the best shape I've been in a really long time, and I don't want to let that go.
Yeah. So I think that's awesome. Because even looking at that first 18 miles compared to your 18, you probably beat that by 45 minutes.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
If not more.
Yeah.
And then the farthest you'd had run next is a 50K, and you beat that by 3 hours. And it's just like, and then for me last year, like the way I feel like 2 days after today, I can walk upstairs. Last year I ran the 32. I was wrecked for days.
Yeah.
Like I thought I was ready. No.
Yeah.
But today I feel good. Like if I had to go run right now, I could go run a mile.
I wouldn't want to run. I think
I don't want to, but I could.
Yeah.
So
it's awesome.
Yeah.
Good job, man.
Appreciate it.
Good job, both of you.
Yeah. And if you want to do dumb things too, check out Bighorn Trail Race. Sign-ups usually happen January, and it does fill up. So if you're interested in doing that, it is a fun weekend. June is about as pretty a time as you can be in the Bighorns. The wildflowers are popping. It's just...
Come a day early, come to the showroom, check out Weatherby.
It's a gorgeous time. So Wyoming sucks. Don't come. We'll see you later.
Wyoming sucks.